Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we will attempt to shed some light on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Network North proposals. Well, what are they then? Well, this new package of rail and road improvements was of course outlined at the recent Conservative Party conference and trumpeted as a better value alternative to the simultaneously cancelled northern section of the HS2 project, which had been scheduled to link Birmingham with Manchester. We've read many words over the last couple of weeks explaining why halting an over-budget, over-inflated HS2 extension project was the difficult but brave political decision. Yet we've also heard and read huge amounts about why cancelling such a large and strategically significant national infrastructure project will terminally undermine efforts to level up the national economy and destroy market confidence in the UK's ability to plan major projects. But the decision has been made, and the Department for Transport has rushed out its press releases, its maps and its plans to explain the detail around precisely what this new Network North is all about, and of course it's tried to attempt to explain the timescales over which any of it will actually be delivered. So it warrants deeper explanation. It's therefore my pleasure to welcome Alasdair Reisner, Chief Executive of the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. Of course, while he certainly represents many of the businesses impacted by the HS2 cancellation, he also represents those likely to gain from this new plan. So I hope knows more than most about the reality of what's just been plucked from the Prime Minister's conference hat. Alasdair, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks, great to be here.
Right, Alasdair, you recently wrote a blog on LinkedIn titled "What Can We Expect from Network North and Why Is Much of It Not in the North?", which of course caught my eye, worthy of exploring further, I thought. So here you are. Let's kick off. You're disappointed, but are you more disappointed as a construction professional, a political influencer, or as a northerner?
That's a really interesting question, because I think if you asked me to put generally those things in order, I would say definitely northerner first, construction person second. I'm not sure I'm a construction professional. Construction person second, and political influencer would be way towards the bottom. But for me, on this one, this is a massive political disappointment. And the reason for that is we don't take a political position on the major parties, but I think it's fair to say for the last decade, the infrastructure sector has been sailing with the wind politically.
Right, yeah.
We have had strong support for the delivery of infrastructure by the UK government, and it has meant that we've been able to do brilliant things to upgrade the quality of UK infrastructure. You only need to look at things like the Elizabeth line and the enormous transformational change that has created to see the benefit of the work that our members do, said the lobbyist. But suddenly, you know, I think we got a change in the wind. And it didn't happen around the HS2 decision. We sensed it probably about a year ago that the government just lost all interest in infrastructure.
Right.
Just fell down its list of priorities. And so, we're left in a position where I would say the government has pretty much given up on its infrastructure agenda, including HS2.
Well, that sounds very disappointing, and certainly, not really particularly what we wanted to hear, but also what we're used to hearing, because, of course, HS2 was, for many, many years, one of the rare things that had cross-party support. And I suppose it's disappeared now. But your blog opened by accepting that you and Seeker, have been very critical of government for its handling of HS2 to Manchester. I mean, where for you were the failings primarily?
When we look back at this, as I was writing the blog the other week, I did go back and look at some of my notes way back from sort of 2012, 2013, 2014, the early days of HS2. And it's amazing to look back at that and to see what the anticipated programme was back then. Had we stuck to that programme, a lot of it would have been delivered by now. You would have the fundamentals of HS2 in place. Unfortunately, what we have seen is, because it's quite a political project, any opportunity there was to delay, to take extra soundings from backbenchers, or there's a difficult by-election coming up, they took that opportunity, and it's just been pushed back and back. And you know how our industry works. Construction price inflation runs vastly ahead of general inflation in the economy. So lo and behold, the costs have gone up, and the government has had, in essence, very little control over what's going on the project. So for me, I think I'm quite supportive of HS2 as a business. I think they've made mistakes, and we've been critical of some of the mistakes they've been made. But ultimately, the big challenge for HS2 has been a political system that didn't know how to handle a project the size of this.
Yeah, well, I suppose we also all know that every time you introduce change, every time you change the scope, then you inevitably push costs up.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen. I mean, also stuff just getting stuck in decision loops that never end, and as a result of that, the market gets a sense of, this is going to be a problem project, and everyone goes a little bit back into, we're not sure where we are on this job now.
Well, we'll talk a little bit later about the implications of Rishi Sunak's decision. But would you say that cancellation has always been inevitable, given the pressure on the public purse, the impact of inflation, and the clear lack of government, increasing lack of government in the project's ability to appeal to voters?
I think when Boris Johnson stepped down as Prime Minister, that's when, to an extent, it became inevitable. Because if you look back through Rishi Sunak's speeches to Parliament throughout his entire short parliamentary career, I don't think he's ever said anything positive about HS2. He is not a fan of the project, and we just have to be honest about that. That is the nature of democracy. So I would also say, even going back, so I remember having conversations with people in 2018 when we started talking to them about market engagement on phase 2, and there was a nervousness that we didn't see with phase 1. There was a nervousness about, we're not sure about this, we're not sure about that. So there's obviously been, for me, something within the project that people have had their doubts. And the irony is, of course, that phase 2 is the best bit of the project. It's the bit that really unlocks the value.
That's where it unlocks the value. I've always said from the start that phase 2 is where the big prize is. But of course, Rishi Sunak has also been advised by Andrew Gilligan, and of course he has always been against the project.
Yeah, and this thing, it's very easy because look, I'm a construction lobbyist. I want to build things. There are other voices out there, and there have been people in Whitehall and Westminster that are very anti-HS2. And I don't think we can just say, we can ignore them. I may disagree with them, but I think where we had been previously was that we had made the case quite successfully. Right, yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of the players that we had made that case to suddenly were moved off the pitch. And you had people coming in who, with very little controls over them, were just allowed to present another agenda, and there was no one there, because it doesn't feel like Treasury are supportive. It doesn't even feel like DfT are that supportive. And when you've got no political support on the pitch, it's quite difficult to sustain a project.
Well, we are where we are, I suppose. But before we get into unpacking the Network North proposal, I mean, just explain your concerns over, where this cancellation leaves us. As you say, no plan for boosting north-south rail capacity, a real problem at Euston. But I see that, the construction delegations have been going in to see the Chancellor recently, and that the Labour Party has promised a review. I mean, are your concerns being allayed in any way as the dust settles?
No, and I think there's two reasons for that. Well, and I think this is a really, really important point, because we've got to be honest, we've got to be pragmatic. The reality is it's unlikely the current government will be the government in a year's time. On that basis, none of this should matter, because it's really what's Labour's agenda. However, it feels like the current government is going out of its way to make sure that HS2, as imagined, cannot happen at all. They are trying to use the site at Euston for other uses, which would prevent any further expansion platforms. They are selling off the land in Phase 2A and looking to do so with release the safeguarding in Phase 2B. So it's almost like saying, before we leave, we will make sure that no one can ever do this project again. And that, for me, is really worrying, because it sounds vindictive, and government shouldn't act like that. I suppose the only hope would be that a Labour administration coming in does say, we're fully committed to this. But the reality is, to an extent, the government has made it easier for Labour to say, actually, no, we've looked at the books and we can't do this project. Yeah. But when you bring it back to the fundamentals, no one is answering the question of, we know there is going to be a north-south capacity issue in the relatively near-term future. We know that doing upgrades to the traditional network, as the West Coast mainline upgrade, which you and I will remember was a disaster, don't work. There is no plan to resolve that issue. And without a plan, we're going to have a transport system that grinds to a halt. And that should be on everyone's mind.
Yeah, but we have got Network North. It's a concept that's been discussed and press released, in the past. But where has this revamped collection of projects really come from then?
If I was being honest, I feel like there was a desire to show that something was being done as opposed to HS2 Phase 2, and therefore, in essence, all the information that was available from DfT, and I'm not sure that DfT were probably that involved in the process because it was a political announcement rather than a departmental announcement, but I imagine it was just, let's get everything on the table. Doesn't really matter where it is, doesn't really matter what stage it is, but anything that we can package together as an alternate plan for investment, and it was just chucked and like jelly at the wall.
Well, I was drawn to your reference to Sunak's speech as being, I think you said, interesting for its bold approach to both announcing funding and its views on where the north is.
Yeah.
Well, let's explore your analysis. I mean, starting with what they say is Network North's promise is to get passengers from Manchester to the new station in Bradford in 30 minutes, Sheffield in 42 minutes, and to Hull in 84 minutes on a fully electrified line. As you say, it appears to be a commitment to Northern Powerhouse Rail. That's good news,
Yes,
isn't it?
And look, we are huge supporters of Northern Powerhouse Rail. It is. We've talked about the agglomeration benefits of bringing together the major cities of the north, and this is a scheme that in part will deliver those benefits. So it's a really good thing, but let's be honest, we all assumed it was happening in any case. So the government had never said, no, we can't do Northern Powerhouse Rail. So we thought that was as well as HS2, whereas now it's become instead of. The problem with that is part of Northern Powerhouse Rail was the bits of HS2 Phase 2. So while that bit will be going ahead, it feels a bit like they're desperately trying to do some sleight of hand stuff here to say, oh, no, we're doing more of what the North wants. And it's like, well, actually, if the whole thing doesn't hang together because you've just tried to chuck it together at short notice, are you going to unlock all the benefits?
Well, they also, promises to protect the $12 billion to link up Manchester and Liverpool as planned. So what's that all about? How do you interpret that then?
So that, as we understand it, is that bit of Northern Powerhouse Rail that was in the original HS2 Phase 2B. The problem that I can foresee there is the business case for that, as we understand it, might not stack up when it's isolated on its own as compared to if it was part of the HS2 Phase B. So there's the risk that saying, we're promising to deliver the money, but when it's got a low BCR, well, we can't deliver schemes that have a low BCR, and it just sort of drifts off to the right as an idea that we'd like to deliver, but actually we can't afford to do.
And of course, these things take an awful long while to plan as well. It's not going to be delivered any time soon, regardless.
Yeah. So I think that is the problem.
Yeah. Scheme by scheme, then, and there's quite a lot of other schemes that are mentioned. Of course, the first being, the Midlands Rail Hub is mentioned. I mean, that presumably is good news, apart from the fact that it's in the Midlands.
The Midlands, yeah. Well, a proud northerner though I am, I run a national organisation, so I want there to be development across the whole of the UK. And look, the Midlands Rail Hub is a brilliant project, really, really good at creating additional capacity, better operating network in the Midlands. Yeah. So to have it as part of Network North feels a bit okay. I mean, it doesn't feel very northern, but it is. Look, let's not get sidetracked by. It's a good project that we're pleased is going ahead.
Similarly, we will help Andy Street extend the West Midlands Metro. Again, not a bad thing, but it's in the Midlands.
It's in the Midlands. So I think we're going to keep coming back to this theme. And for that one, I think part of the problem there is those schemes that they're talking about, I don't think are very well developed. It's not one that I'm hugely familiar with, but I believe they're quite early stage schemes. There are some extensions that are currently ongoing, and they're brilliant. But I think if we're expecting that to be sort of the next cab off the rank relatively shortly, activity happening in the Midlands, I'm not convinced that will be the case. But it's good news for the longer term. The other problem with that one is, to an extent, some of the benefits that would, I assume, be predicated on HS2. And now part of HS2 is not happening. So how does that affect the case for those projects going forward?
No. Well, I suppose that's the circular argument. All these projects that were going to be part of a bigger thing, they're all going to be impacted. But he does say we will build the Leeds tram, and that must be interesting for a northerner.
It absolutely. So I feel, just as I'm a northerner, I still in my head think I'm young, but I'm not, because 20 years ago, back when I was a journalist, I was writing about what was called Leeds Supertram at the time. And so the prospect of Leeds Tram is brilliant. I think it's one of the largest cities in Europe that doesn't have a light rail network. So why wouldn't you want to do this? But again, the government committed to spend, I think, £300 million on developing the case for Leeds Tram. So wasn't this already going to be happening? And let's also remember that was a SOP because they were no longer getting the eastern leg of HS2. So, a lot of this feels like stuff that should have been happening in any case. Look, if these projects have got a good business cases, they're investments in our future. We should do them in any case, regardless of whether HS2 is happening.
Yeah. Which, of course, they are going to do with the next announcement, the North Wales Main Line upgrade. Again, a fantastic project, but as you say, it's not in the north.
Well, it's not in Midlands either. It's in Wales, and I think this is another slightly different project, because I think one of the big challenges for HS2 was the fact that it's rather boring, but the Barnet consequentials, the money that devolved nations get as a result of projects, Wales didn't get any because it was perceived that there was a benefit to Wales, whereas this is a direct benefit to Wales on a main line that is in severe need of an upgrade. The problem is the money committed doesn't seem to match the cost of actually doing the scheme. So it's another one of these things that's a fantastic project, but will it happen? I remain to be convinced. If it is, it'll probably be a spec'd down version on what people would have envisaged that scheme would be.
Okay. A bit about you, Alice, because I've said you're a northerner. You grew up in Northumberland, which makes you, I suppose, which makes Sunak's plan to upgrade the A1, as you say, personal to you. But you point out that again, that's not new money. But does that matter?
It doesn't matter. I mean, look, I'm really, really passionate about the scheme. When I was doing my work experience at school on the Hexham Courant, it was a time when they were talking about the upgrading of the A1, and it won't surprise you to learn that's something like 30 years ago. So the fact that it is, in theory, happening is really, really good news. The fact that the money has already been announced, that it's a one that was supposed to be sort of up and running fairly soon, I'm not too bothered about it. I just want to see it done. However, even with the announcement the other week, I'm still not convinced because it's been delayed because of the planning issues around it. I hope that it is now both affordable and deliverable. I think this would be a real litmus test for the government. If they can't even get this one away, which is basically ready to go, it kind of undermines the whole of Network North.
You've been at Seeker for the last 15 years and Chief Exec for 9. I mean, what's kept you there? And do you think it's getting harder to lobby on behalf of the construction sector? Or is it becoming more entertaining, more fun? I don't know. I mean, how has it changed?
I mean, why have I been here for 15 years? The answer is really simple, because I bloody love it. I get up every day and it is exciting, interesting, there's new things going on. It can be super, super challenging. There can be really big disappointments. There can be things that go horribly wrong. But I couldn't ask for a better job. There are so many opportunities to do really beneficial things for our members, including lobbying the government. I would say, actually, since COVID, it's to me been easier not to lobby the government, but to engage with the government. They've been much more open to having conversations with the industry than they perhaps have been historically. The problem is, I think, when it comes to the really big stuff, they stop being in listening mode, and it's more, this is what we're doing.
But no, because there's an awful lot of new things. I mean, we've always talked a lot about health and safety. There's a much stronger emphasis now on welfare and well-being. Plus, there's a whole drive towards efficiency, digitisation and net zero. But then you've got inflation, payment practice. There's loads of stuff to get into. For you, it's still absolutely good fun, is it?
It is good fun, and also it's not just about the fun; it's about the showing the impact. To give an example of that, and it's quite a while ago now, but we were approached by some of our members around forward tipping dumpers. Fairly mundane thing used on sites across the country, but sadly there had been a number of deaths associated with their use. Now, I'm not going to claim that it was Seeker what won it, but actually, if you go around the country now and you look at some of those dumpers being used, they've got much better safety precautions around them. And so for me, one of the benefits of doing the job is we're able to work with industry colleagues to genuinely change lives, genuinely make people safer. I'm confident there are people alive today because of the work that we and others did around improving safety in the sector.
No, but not forgetting you used to be a respected journalist at Construction News, and I suppose that was a lot of that was about campaigning, trying to change things. So but don't tell me you don't miss being a journalist, Alasdair.
So I like the phrase respected journalist. I think that's the first time I've ever heard that one. I miss the sort of the cut and thrust. I think it is, you'll know yourself, it is great fun being a journalist, finding things out. I would say I wasn't a great journalist, and everyone who knows me knows that I was very fortunate to work with a lot of people that were really, really good journalists at a time when the paper was doing super well. But yeah, I still have a little bit of a nose for news, and the difficult thing is now, if I hear a news story, I've got nothing to do with it, so I've got to keep it to myself.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who would love to hear about these things. But anyway, back to Network North. There's a whole bunch of road schemes in there. I thought we were talking about rail. No, there's a whole bunch of road schemes in there. Upgrade the M6, upgrade the A5, upgrade the A2, which, is, as you point out, is in Kent. Upgrade the A75. Is that what it's all about in terms of levelling up? Should we be more kind of transport mode agnostic rather than thinking just simply about rail?
Well, I think in our sector we now talk about delivering outcomes rather than outputs. And frankly, I think the outcomes we need in transport is really happy transport users, people who are delighted to use the transport network in whatever way, shape or form that is. Decarbonisation, reduced cost to the consumer, and the ability to get where you want, when you want. How we do that, I'm not too fussed about. I'm a big proponent for road building at a time when that's not a popular thing to be, but that's because I've got a really positive view on the rollout of EV and what that's going to mean in terms of emissions. But I do think it has to be harnessed to radical change in the way that we source energy in this country. We cannot continue relying on oil. But yeah, I think that road and rail and walking, active transport all play a huge important role.
Yep. So you're pleased to hear talk of funding the Shipley bypass and the Blythe Relief Road. Those are important announcements alongside all this.
They are, because actually for me, while they don't mean anything, they don't move the radar on the national picture, if they're local to you and they resolve an issue that is blighting your community, then they're really important to you. And I think part of sort of one of the big challenges of politics over the last few years is sort of Westminster has got detached from the people that it represents. So we shouldn't lose sight that some of these, we call smaller projects, but they still could be 50, 100 million quid, which is, it's a big scheme in most people's eyes, make big differences for particular communities out around the UK. And that's why, I'm very supportive of that, not least because Blythe is obviously in Northumberland and, anything up north is good.
Yeah. There's also this talk about bringing back the Don Valley line, upgrading the East Coast line between Carlisle, Workington, Barrow, and electrify the Hope Valley line between Sheffield and Manchester. That all sounds like positive new money. But there's some other eye-catching big tickets things in there. There's a promise of £4 billion to ensure all 6 northern city regions will receive 75% more funding than they do now. That sounds transformational, but is it real?
Well, I think first we need to check whether that's in real terms 75%, or whether it allows for inflation. But increasing devolution of transport funding is something that we're supportive of, because local communities know better where to spend money to achieve the biggest bang for the buck. I do think there's got to be a little bit of oversight, of control, but generally speaking, let those people who are closest to the issues identify and resolve those issues. And I think that where government is looking to do that, it should be supported.
Okay.
I think my only slight problem is, again, it goes to the, but weren't you really going to do this in any case?
Yeah.
Is this really new money, or is this just, as I say, growing the pot as you would expect?
Well, they do say creating a brand new, which sounds like it's new, brand new £2.5 billion fund to transform local transport in every part of the north. Where's the catch there then?
And this is where we sit there and go, well, this sounds really good. I think the really important thing in this discussion is not to go, we're really angry about HS2, therefore anything that you put on the table by way of replacement is bad. It's not bad. It's really good that we're choosing to spend money elsewhere around the country. Again, if we look at our historic track record, the UK has been below our G8 comparators in terms of our levels of investment in infrastructure. So I would argue, why not do both? If we can get bond sales to secure the funding for this, which I think you probably still can for investment in infrastructure, albeit the bond market has risen quite dramatically in recent months. Why not do more? Why not be ambitious? Why not say we're going to do both? Because actually we know that both will unlock growth and a better future for our nation.
Okay, I mean, and along that line, when the promise of £460 million to ensure the delivery of 21 smaller road schemes and the launch of a £1 billion road fund, and an additional £3.3 billion to tackle potholes. I mean, surely they're all good, or is it all about winning votes? I don't know.
Well, I think people can get very sniffy about potholes. Money for potholes when you're supposed to be delivering transformational infrastructure. When you look at what matters to voters, potholes is a really big issue that people do care about. The problem is, ironically, we've done a bit of patch and mend for such a long time that actually we do need to properly invest in highways maintenance. So I'm okay with spending more on potholes. My only argument is you probably need to spend more up front to reduce the cost in the long term. Because if you're just going in and, in essence, whacking down some more blacktop that doesn't resolve the problem in the long term, you're just building up further problems for the future.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, fundamentally the challenge with all this would be about deliverability. I mean, are your members getting geared up right now and excited about the prospect of a £36 billion injection of spending?
I think it's too early to tell. Most of them will just be reviewing what's said. I think they are all mindful of the fact that there is going to be an election. I would actually say, however, the industry is already geared up because, you've got that resource, you've got that capacity. It's about managing it. There's some really big other things coming on the table. We know that the water sector is going to explode in the next few years in terms of volumes. We know that particularly onshore renewables, we're expecting there to be volumes of investment there. So I think industry is already ready to deliver. We do have the challenge of, do we have enough bodies to deliver everything that we want to do? But that's a nice problem to have. What we do really need, and what helps with that recruitment thing, is certainty. And that's what probably the government's announcement created the problem of, is we're not sure we've got the certainty.
Well, no, certainty. Market confidence gives businesses, your members, the ability to invest in the systems that are going to bring more efficiency, the training that brings more effectiveness, and I suppose that presumably must have a big confidence knocking nature. A U-turn of this scale, that is a worry for you, is it?
Well, I don't want to flag up my LinkedIn here, but one of the things that I'm looking at as a next blog is looking at the real cost of the HSE cancellation, and it's not just the what you're going to have to pay to the rolling stock manufacturers in terms of the reduced number of trains and things like that. It's not about what happens at Euston. There's also that impact of what does this mean for companies that currently work on public sector projects and their willingness to work and the risk weighting they apply to that work? What's the hidden underlying cost of the reduction in confidence about working with a government that doesn't seem to want to work with industry anymore? And I think that could be quite stark, but it'll never be seen because it's all just sort of lost in the price of everything going forward.
Well, I don't mind flagging up your next LinkedIn blog. We can certainly recommend that to people. I mean, finally, I suppose, on this issue, I mean, how are you feeling about the response from Labour? A review is promised. What could that achieve? Does it fill you with, I suppose, hope and confidence?
I think that industry probably views anything being put into a review as a politically convenient way of kicking the can down the road. But the reality is, to an extent, the government has given that option, has laid it out on the table to Labour to say,
back it or not.
You do that. But almost, I think what the government was trying to do was to say, here's what we're going to do. If you're going to do HS2, you have to say you're not going to do all these projects. But because subsequently all of this, the Network North plan has fallen to pieces, Labour can go, well, we can't say we're going to do. We don't even know what you're planning. You haven't been clear. So I think it does give Labour a bit of headroom to work it to their advantage. And I think we would expect that would be the case. I think that in practical terms, Labour will probably seek to deliver something akin to HS2 over a timeline that allows them to manage those stakeholders that are interested, some of the northern mayors, while also not dropping the things that people do care about. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw the safeguarding for the HS2 phase 2 route and the Old Oak Common to Euston protected, but actually the priority being the work on the Northern Powerhouse rail schemes. However, I should say we don't have any special insight on that. We are as eagerly awaiting the views of Labour on this as everyone else.
But also, I imagine, eagerly awaiting the views of the National Infrastructure Commission's National Needs Appraisal, which comes out next week. And I imagine it's going to highlight a number of investment priorities. I mean, what is your pre-election strategy to ensure that when they come up with that, all this infrastructure investment ideas, they stay top of the agenda?
So we've actually gone quite early ahead of the election. So we have worked on our what we've in essence called a manifesto for infrastructure. Ironically, our priority is to maintain existing investment. So almost as we were putting the document together, our main priority has sort of fallen down around our ears. But I think that fundamental thing of knowing that longer term plan, that longer term strategy for transport is something that we are very keen to see. So I think the National Needs Appraisal is something that will be helpful to give that independent view, because look, voices like ours will ultimately always say, just build loads more things. Voices like some of the NGOs will say, just don't build anything at all. You need that independence of the NIC to say, no, look, this is what our country needs collectively for its future growth and positivity. And so we're really interested to see what the NIC has to say.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I will be speaking to National Infrastructure Commission's Chief Exec, James Heath, next week. So find out all about what's going on there. So that's a great point to finish. So, Alasdair, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. Really interesting discussion. Thanks for trying to shed some light on, what is a kind of it's an interesting set of developments that have come out of the political world at the moment, and certainly something which, on the one hand, you say we can feel very negative about it, we can also feel positive about some other things. So thanks for putting some clarity around it. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Great. Well, that's all we've got time for today on the podcast, but we will have more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the new Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you're going to find lots of background information to this podcast and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Alasdair. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.